I was 16 the first time I heard it. God, I wish you were a boy. My dad didn't even flinch when he said it. Just sipped his coffee, scrolled through the news on his iPad. Like he hadn't just shattered a part of me I hadn't even known was fragile. Mom was silent. As always. My brother, Jason, sat next to me, smirking like he'd won something. He always won. Football trophies. Road trips with Dad. Weekend coding camps. And me? I got lectures about skirt lengths and cooking classes. I remember that morning so vividly. It was the day my SAT results came in. I had ranked in the top 1%. I ran downstairs, holding the paper like it was gold. I thought they'd be proud. But Dad barely looked up. "Sweetheart," he said flatly, "this won't matter when you get married." And just like that, my joy folded into silence. Years passed. I kept my head down, worked harder than ever. Late nights, early mornings, I lived in libraries while Jason partied through high school. Still, every time he made a B, Dad took him out for dinner. Every A+ I got? A nod, if I was lucky. I applied to Harvard behind their backs. I didn't tell them until I had the acceptance letter in my hand. It was a Saturday. Sunny. I'll never forget that sunlight. It made me feel like maybe things could change. I walked into the living room, heart pounding. "Dad." I got in. Harvard. Full ride. He stared at the letter for a second, then laughed. Actually laughed. Then he said, "Harvard? That's just a fancy way to waste money on a daughter." I felt something in me snap. Like the last string holding me to the idea of being enough for them, just gave up. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me. I wasn't crying. Not anymore. I was quiet. Focused. I wrote something in my journal, a promise. If I can't change this house, I'll change my fate. I didn't know how, or when, but I knew I would. Even if it meant walking alone. For years later, I found out the truth. I was back home for Thanksgiving. Jason wasn't there. He'd moved to Austin, working on some shiny new startup. I overheard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking to Aunt Linda. Laughing. Proud. She said, "Jason's company is doing great. Thank God we used Emily's college fund to get it off the ground." My blood ran cold. My college fund? I stepped back from the doorway. My hands shook. I couldn't breathe. They never told me. Not once. Not when I had to take part-time jobs. Not when I skipped meals to save money. Not when I thought they couldn't afford to help me. They could. They just didn't want to. They chose him. I didn't confront them. Not then. I just quietly packed my bag that night, left the next morning, and never looked back. That was the day I truly understood. I wasn't the son they wanted. But I was the woman they should have never underestimated. And I had just begun writing my own story. The day I graduated, the campus felt like a dream. Thousands of caps flying in the air, families cheering, hugs, laughter, flowers. And me? I stood alone. No parents, no banner, no one with my last name in the crowd. Just me, in a stiff gown, holding a degree I had paid for with sleepless nights, side jobs, and quiet tears. But I wasn't bitter. Not that day. That day, I felt free. I'd landed my dream job in San Francisco, software engineer at a rising AI firm. 6 figures. Stock options. A place in a world that once told me I wasn't built for it. I packed my tiny dorm room into 2 suitcases, took a deep breath, and made a decision. Before heading to the West Coast, I'd stop by home. One night. Just to show them I made it. To give them a chance. But when I got there, the front porch light was off. I knocked once. Twice. No answer. I checked my phone, a new email sat unread. Subject, legal notice, estate update. I opened it with shaking fingers. You are hereby removed from all inheritance and estate planning. You're on your own now. No greeting. No explanation. Just ice. My key didn't work anymore. The locks had been changed. And that's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. They had cut me off. Not emotionally, legally. That night, I booked a red-eye to San Francisco. I didn't cry on the flight. I just stared out the window, the city lights below blurring into each other. Thinking, is this what freedom is supposed to feel like? Because it hurt like hell. But somewhere in that pain, something sparked. By morning, I had a plan. If I didn't have a home to go back to, I'd build one for myself. 3 years later, I was sitting in a boardroom, pitching my own startup. Eve Tech. Built from scratch. No help. No safety net. Just grit, code, and a refusal to give up. We were solving real problems in women's digital safety, an app that detected emotional abuse through pattern recognition. Investors liked it. But one man in particular caught my attention. He wore an expensive watch, smelled like old money, and stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. After the meeting, he pulled me aside quietly. He said, "Emily, I knew your father." I froze. He took off his glasses, looked down, and whispered, "I should have spoken up when he talked about you. He was wrong. You were never the problem." I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like to hear those words. But not from him. From them. Still, something in me softened. Because in that moment, I realized something important. Even if my parents erased me from their world, the world hadn't erased me. They said I was dead to them. But in truth, that was the day I started to live. It had been almost 6 years since I last heard their voices. 6 long years of silence. 6 years of building something from nothing. Eve Tech had finally made it to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. My photo, standing tall in front of our downtown office, a quiet fire in my eyes, was on the homepage for 24 hours. And on the 25th hour, they called. It was an email, actually. From my mother's account. Subject, urgent. Please call. I didn't open it right away. My hands shook just seeing her name on the screen. Like some ghost had found a way back into my life. When I finally read it, my heart stopped. Jason is sick. We've tried everything. He needs treatment, and we need your help. There it was. The golden child. The reason I had once eaten cold noodles for weeks while he flew first class to some startup summit. The boy they said was meant for great things. Now reaching for me. The same family who said I was dead to them. Now asking me to save the son they'd practically chosen instead of me. I stared at my laptop screen for what felt like hours. My thoughts were loud. Too loud. Do they deserve this from me? Would they have done the same if I were sick? Am I still the daughter they disowned, or just their last resort? But I also remembered Jason's laugh. The way he used to bring me Oreos after Dad's rants. He wasn't always cruel, just blind. Just favored. And I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. Just tired. So I said yes. But with one condition. You can meet me. But not at your house. At mine. I didn't want to go back to that cold hallway. That front door that once didn't open. This time, they would walk through my door. They came 2 days later. A black SUV. My mother stepped out first, looking older, thinner. Dad followed. Same posture. Same sharp eyes. But there was someone else behind them. A man in a gray suit, briefcase in hand. A lawyer. My chest tightened. I opened the door slowly. No hugs. No tears. Just silence. They sat across from me in my living room, sipping coffee they hadn't asked for. I waited. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was slow, rehearsed. "We're grateful you agreed to meet. But there are financial matters. Legal things." He looked at the lawyer, who opened the briefcase and pulled out papers. "We'd like to make arrangements. In return for helping Jason, we believe it's fair to revisit certain estate matters." I stared at them. Not a single "I'm sorry." Not one word about the years they erased me. Just contracts. Numbers. Conditions. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at them, really looked. And I thought to myself, they didn't come here for healing. They came here for a deal. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. But not just yet. Not before letting them believe the meeting was going their way. Because sometimes, silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. And I had learned that, from the very people who thought I'd never learn a thing. They sat in my living room like they still belonged there. As if the years hadn't passed. As if they hadn't erased me from their lives. My father wore a tailored suit, his posture stiff, hands folded. Like this was some business deal. My mother barely looked at me. She kept her eyes on the table, on the contracts, on everything but me. And then, he said it. "Legally, we're entitled to a portion of your wealth. We're still your parents." Something inside me went very still. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, turning the pages of the trust document slowly, like the words might rearrange themselves into something more human. But they didn't. His voice echoed in the room. Cold. Calculated. My mother nodded along silently, as if she agreed, as if she deserved something from the daughter she once abandoned. And in that moment, a line I thought I had buried came crashing back. I was 15. In the kitchen. Trying to show her a science trophy I'd won. She looked at it, then at me, and muttered, "God must be punishing us. First child, a girl. Second child, a blessing." I had smiled through it back then. Told myself I misheard it. That maybe she meant something else. But no. She meant exactly that. And now here they were, in my home, sipping my tea, asking for a share of the life they never helped me build. All because I'd made it. Because their son, the golden child, was drowning in debt. And the daughter they had discarded was their last resort. I took a breath and looked up. "Actually, I'm no longer Emily Carter," I said softly. "I legally changed my last name 2 years ago." They looked up, surprised. And not just the name. My legal identity. My trust. Everything tied to who I am now isn't tied to you. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Dad stiffened. But I wasn't done. I did create a trust. With your names in it. Their eyes lit up, just for a second. But there's a clause. A hidden one. Now they looked confused. I stood up, walked to the shelf, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, a single printed page. I handed it to the lawyer. Clause 14b, any beneficiary found to have disowned or discriminated against the grantor based on gender identity, worth, or societal expectation shall forfeit all rights to the trust. The room fell into silence. Even the air felt heavier. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, read it out loud again, slowly. My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened. "You tricked us," he finally snapped. I smiled gently. Calm. Collected. "No," I said. "You taught me the rules. I just finally learned how to play the game better. And that was the moment I saw it. Not rage. Not regret. But realization. That their daughter wasn't broken. She was rebuilt. And this time, with iron bones and her own last name. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes before a storm. Or just after one has passed and left everything in pieces. I sat across from them, my parents, in my own living room. The same people who once changed the locks on me. Now waiting with tight jaws and hollow eyes. As my attorney slowly flipped through the trust document. Page by page. Clause by clause. Their hands twitched, their breaths short. They thought they were close to winning something back. But they didn't know what was coming. Not yet. And then, we reached it. Clause 17, subsection B. The one I had written myself. My lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses, and read it aloud. His voice was calm. Clear. Every word hit like a stone. Any beneficiary who has ever disowned, abandoned, or discriminated against the grantor based on gender or perceived worth shall forfeit all rights and privileges under this trust. Effective immediately and irrevocably. I watched their faces carefully. First, confusion. Then recognition. And then, panic. My mother blinked like she didn't understand. But she did. My father? His face turned red. He slammed his hand on the table. This is manipulation. You tricked us. His voice bounced off the walls. But I didn't flinch. I leaned in slightly, my voice even and soft. No, Dad. You taught me how this game works. I just learned it better. Silence. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. Because it leaves no room to argue, no place to hide. They had spent years telling me I wasn't enough. That I wasn't what they wanted. That being born a daughter was a disappointment they had to carry. And now? Now the system they once used to lock me out was the same one I'd used to shut them out. Legally. Permanently. The lawyer closed the folder. As of this moment, the trust is dissolved in relation to both of you. You no longer hold any financial or legal rights connected to Ms. Grace's estate. My new name, Grace Monroe, echoed in the room like a line they couldn't erase. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked lost. Not angry. Just like a stranger in a place that used to be hers. And maybe, in a way, that's exactly what she was. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the skyline. My heart was steady. Not proud. Not cold. Just steady. Because this wasn't revenge. It was closure. They hadn't just disowned me once. They did it 100 times, in small words, in sideways looks, in slammed doors and cold silences. And now? Now the paper reflected what had always been true. I had built this life on my own. And I had protected it. Not out of bitterness. But out of clarity. They stood slowly. No more shouting. No more bargaining. Just the soft sound of papers being packed. And the echo of footsteps as they left my home. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't the one walking away. They were. And this time, it was final. I sat on the balcony of my penthouse apartment in Seattle. The sun dipping low behind the skyline, casting a golden hue on everything. But my hands weren't steady. They were holding something heavier than paper. A piece of my past I'd never thrown away. It was the letter. The one they had mailed me the year I left for my first job. No phone call. No goodbye hug. Just one envelope. And inside it? Since you've chosen your career over family, we've chosen to remove you from our lives. Do not come back. Signed coldly. By people who once brought me into this world. I used to read that letter in the dark. Late nights. Lonely moments. When the silence of my apartment felt too loud, and I questioned if I was really unlovable. But tonight? I held it in the light. Because tonight, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't crying. I was recording. My phone rested on a tripod in front of me, camera rolling. No script. No filters. Just me. My truth. And a heart that had finally found its voice. I took a deep breath, then looked straight into the lens. Hi. If you're a girl who's ever been told you weren't enough, that you were born the wrong gender, or that love had conditions, this story is for you. My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't stop. Because this was the moment I'd been building toward, not with rage, but with resilience. I shared it all. The day they told me Harvard was a waste of money. The moment they changed the locks on the house. The time they came back, not with love, but with a lawyer. And the final clause that ended it all. I built my company from scratch, I said. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I never needed their approval to be powerful. The wind blew gently. The sky turned darker. But inside me, there was light. A kind I'd never felt before. I held up the letter. They called this a rejection. But I call it redirection. I smiled through a tear. Because without this moment, I might have stayed small. I might have kept begging for love, instead of becoming the kind of woman who creates her own worth. The camera kept rolling, but for a second, I just sat there in silence, soaking it in. The freedom, the grief, the growth. I ended the video the way I wish someone had once spoken to me. They disowned a daughter, but the world embraced a woman. I turned off the camera. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a wound trying to heal. I felt like a fire that had survived the storm and learned to shine even brighter because of it.